He held up my phone, an old flip model I'd bought for $10 at a thrift store, and laughed. "Mom, this belongs in a museum. How do you even survive with this thing?" I smiled, tucking it back into my purse. To him, it was junk. To me, it worked just fine, but life has a way of humbling even the proudest voices. Because 2 weeks later, that same son who mocked my phone came knocking at my door, begging for access to my Wi-Fi. Tell me, have you ever been laughed at, only to become the one holding the power later? I've never cared much for fancy gadgets. To me, a phone is just a phone. Something to make calls, send a message, maybe check the time. I don't need the latest model or endless apps to live my life. So when my old phone broke last year, I replaced it with a simple $10 one I found at a secondhand shop. It flipped open, the screen was small, and the buttons clicked when I typed. It reminded me of simpler times, but to my son, it was laughable. One afternoon, he caught me checking a text on it. He burst out laughing so loudly, I thought something was wrong. "Are you kidding me, Mom? That thing looks like it came out of the Stone Age. $10? Seriously?" I shrugged. "It works." He shook his head, still chuckling. "You know, it's embarrassing. What if someone sees you with that? You need to upgrade. Everyone has smartphones now." I smiled gently, but inside a little pang stung. Not because I cared about the phone, but because of the disrespect. After everything I'd given him, the clothes, the schooling, the roof over his head, he reduced me to a joke over a piece of plastic and wires. "Maybe one day I'll upgrade," I said softly. "But for now, this one does what I need." He rolled his eyes. Unbelievable. The subject ended there, but his laughter lingered in the house long after he left. I went about my chores, folding laundry and watering plants, reminding myself that worth isn't measured by what's in your pocket. Still, it hurt. But life has its way of circling back, because 2 weeks later, that same son, so quick to mock, showed up on my doorstep in a panic. His fancy phone, useless without service, his data plan, cut off for missed payments, and the project he had due for school, completely online. "Mom," he said breathlessly, "can I please use your WiFi?" And in that moment, I realized sometimes the one with the $10 phone ends up holding the strongest signal of all. He stood in my doorway, shifting nervously from foot to foot, clutching his sleek but useless smartphone. "Mom," he said, his voice lower than usual, "I need your WiFi password. Just for a little while. My service got cut off, and I've got assignments due. Please." I leaned against the doorframe, studying him. 2 weeks ago, he had laughed at me like I was stuck in another century. Now, with all his modern gadgets, he was powerless without something as simple as my old internet router. I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say I was embarrassing? That I needed to keep up with the times?" His cheeks flushed. "I didn't mean it like that." "I was just joking." I shook my head slowly. "Jokes sting when they're pointed at the person who sacrificed so much for you. You mocked me for a $10 phone, and now you're asking me for something you can't get from your $1,000 one." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he whispered, "You're right. I shouldn't have said that. I really need your help." I let the silence linger. Part of me wanted to give in instantly. After all, he was my son, and I'd never enjoyed watching him struggle. But another part of me remembered the sting of his laughter, the way he dismissed me so easily. I crossed my arms. "Help isn't free." "Not anymore." He blinked. "What do you mean?" I gestured toward the kitchen. "It means if you want my Wi-Fi, you're going to sit down with me. We'll eat dinner together. You'll tell me how school's going, how life's going, and you'll remember that respect comes before passwords." He looked stunned, then slowly nodded. "Okay, deal." So he came in, sat at the kitchen table, and for the first time in months, we shared a real conversation. He told me about the pressures of school, the late nights, the fear of failing. I listened, offering advice only when he asked. Finally, I slid a small notepad across the table, the Wi-Fi password scribbled in my handwriting. "Here," I said, "don't just use it. Remember what it took to get it." He looked at the paper like it was gold. "Thank you, Mom." His voice carried no sarcasm this time, just sincerity. And as he tapped the password into his fancy phone, I couldn't help but smile. Because in that moment, the power had shifted, not out of spite, but out of truth. Sometimes the simplest things carry the most weight. And sometimes a $10 phone and a quiet mother can teach a $1,000 lesson. The first night he used my Wi-Fi, he stayed until midnight, hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table. I sat nearby, knitting quietly, pretending not to notice how often he glanced at me. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't realize how much I took this house for granted." I raised an eyebrow. This house? Or me? His face flushed. Both. For the first time in a long time, his words weren't defensive or laced with sarcasm. They were honest. He set his phone down, the same one that had felt like a trophy in his hands just weeks ago. All my friends joke about upgrades. Phones, cars, clothes. I guess I started seeing people the same way. Like if you don't have the newest, you don't matter. I set my knitting aside. "And what did that get you?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "A phone I couldn't use. And a mom I embarrassed." There it was, the humility I'd been waiting for. Over the next few days, he came by more often. At first, I thought it was just for the WiFi, but slowly I realized it was more. He lingered after finishing his assignments, helping me wash dishes, asking about recipes he used to love as a child. One evening, as we shared a simple dinner of soup and bread, he looked around the kitchen. "You always make do with so little, Mom." I never understood it. But now, I see the strength in it. I smiled softly. Strength isn't in the price tag. It's in the choices we make every day. I chose to live simply so you could have more. I didn't care if my phone was old, as long as you had what you needed. He lowered his eyes, ashamed. "And I mocked you for it." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "What matters is that you see it now." That night, he stayed longer than usual, not glued to his phone, but sitting beside me, listening to stories from when he was little. I could see the boy he used to be, the one who thought his mom was a superhero, not an embarrassment. And in those moments, I realized the Wi-Fi was just the doorway. What he really needed wasn't internet access, it was reconnection. Sometimes life has to strip away the things we think give us power, like a shiny phone, so we can rediscover the real sources of strength. And for him, that strength was sitting right in front of him the whole time. The weeks rolled into months, and what began as a simple request for Wi-Fi turned into something deeper. My son still came by to finish assignments, but now he also came just to talk. Sometimes he'd bring groceries, sometimes he'd cook dinner, other times he'd just sit on the porch with me, scrolling quietly while I watched the sunset. The mocking tone that once cut me was gone. In its place was a newfound respect. Subtle at first, then stronger with each visit. One afternoon, as we folded laundry together, he chuckled softly. "You know, Mom, I used to think your old phone was a joke, but now I get it. You don't need fancy things to live well. You've managed your whole life with less, and I'm finally starting to see the wisdom in that." I smiled. "It's not about what you have. It's about what you value. A phone can break, Wi-Fi can go out, money can vanish. But kindness? Respect? Those last." He nodded, serious now. "I didn't respect you enough before. I thought I was smarter because I had the newest stuff. But you've been smarter all along. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Hearing those words was worth more than any apology he could have rehearsed. They were real. Over time, I noticed he even changed with others. He stopped teasing friends for not having the latest phones. He paid more attention to effort than appearances, and when his younger cousin bragged about getting the newest gadget, my son gently reminded him, "Don't judge people by what they own. That's not what matters." That moment nearly brought me to tears. Looking back, I realized the irony. He had mocked my $10 phone, but in the end, it wasn't the phone that mattered. It was the Wi-Fi. Not because of the internet itself, but because it reconnected us. It forced him to step into my kitchen, to sit at my table, to see me again. Sometimes life teaches lessons in unexpected ways. A broken data plan, a desperate knock at the door, a scrap of paper with a Wi-Fi password scribbled on it. And in those small things, something bigger is revealed. My son learned humility, I regained respect, and together we built a bridge that mocking words had once torn down. Now, whenever I hear the click of my little flip phone closing, I don't feel embarrassed. I feel proud, because it reminds me that simplicity isn't weakness, it's strength. And sometimes the smallest tools open the biggest doors, especially the one that led my son back home. In the end, it was never about the $10 phone or even the Wi-Fi password. It was about respect. My son thought my simplicity made me outdated, but when his world came crashing down, he realized the very things he mocked were the ones that carried him through. I didn't need to upgrade my phone to prove my worth. I only needed to stand firm in who I was. And in doing so, I reminded him that true strength isn't flashy. It's steady, reliable, and always there when needed. So let me ask you, have you ever been laughed at for living simply, only to watch the same people come back to you when it really mattered? How did it feel to hold the power they once dismissed? Share your story below, and stay tuned for more tales where quiet strength turns mockery into respect.